And they told me my baby was dead. I could not believe that. I would not believe that. And then I started seeing pictures being posted everywhere of my baby. Nobody's telling me anything. I don't know anything. It's agonizing. Because I know nothing. Somebody does. And I want them to come forward. Because if it was your family members, you would want the same thing.
A 17-year-old teenage girl who was last seen leaving school with a teenage boy was found behind an abandoned building, deceased. And the boy? Well, he returned to school red-handed, literally with blood on his hands. Her blood. Before he washed him in the school bathroom sink and then called his mother to pick him up early and take him home for the day. This is the story of Tierra Hall. Today's story will take place in Durham, North Carolina, aka Bull City. During the mid-2010s, the city had experienced a cocktail of changes, from its thriving food scene to its flourishing arts and music community and elements of updated technology. Specifically, in the Black community, there were efforts of community activism and inclusion. But as we know, where there's light, there's darkness. And in Durham's case, that darkness consisted of a crime rate in 2015 that was on a 56.72% increase from the year prior. Homicides were on a rise. Even the barely legal was as ruthless as they come. Unfortunately, Tierra Hall fell victim to this statistic. Tierra Hall had moved and settled into Durham with her mother, Katia Hall, in 2012 from Texas, where they're originally from. By 2015, Tierra was a student at Charles E. Jordan High School and was described as being goofy, silly, funny, and loved to make her friends laugh. Her mom says she was always a happy-go-lucky kind of girl and made every day a brighter day for her. She had dreams of owning her own business one day. One of her goals was to obtain a degree in business so she could make her dreams come true. And she would discuss her dreams with her best friend, Amaya. Her and Amaya could have been sisters the way they were so close. They were described to be inseparable. And in March of 2015, the besties had plans of spending their entire spring break together. However, that opportunity had never come. The morning of Friday, March 27th, 2015, it started off pretty normal and excitingly for Tierra as it was the Friday before her spring break. Just before going to school though, Tierra and her mom had gotten into a bit of a disagreement, as most teen girls and their moms do. But it wasn't anything too crazy. Tierra left home, went off to school. But what Katia didn't know was that it would be the last time she'd ever see her daughter alive again. When Tierra didn't come home as usual after school, Katia called her daughter's phone several times, sent her some messages, but Tierra never answered, and she never returned her mother's calls or messages. Now, at this point, Katia didn't think anything was wrong. She just assumed Tierra was still mad at her from the argument that they had, and maybe she was ignoring her while hanging out with her friends, and she'd be back possibly later that night or in the morning. Saturday, March 28, 2015, a couple was taking a walk in the late afternoon when they came across an abandoned home on the 4100 block of Trotter Ridge Road. The house was up for sale, so they wanted to take a closer look at it. And when they came up on the home, as they walked to the back of the home, they saw a female lying down and assumed she was sleeping outside with no coat on, just short sleeves from what they can tell. The man decided to call 911 to get the female some help. When police arrived, they approached the female and immediately knew that it was a young girl, as she was wearing a gray pair of sweats with an Elmo design on the front of her t-shirt. Not only did they realize the female was a young girl, they knew that the young girl was deceased. Police discovered the young girl with some of the most horrific injuries to her head, neck, and chest. It was described as a gruesome sight. They saw blood splatter all around her body and some blood even on the house, at least 2 feet above the ground. There were multiple gashes that indicated she had been stabbed over and over. She had multiple visible wounds. And as a matter of fact, whoever did this to her had been so aggressive in their attack that they left the tip of the knife used to stab her broken off and lodged into the left side of her face. As police were looking around for any evidence, they noticed a phone case next to her with no phone in it and a small piece of paper that was sticking out of her pocket. On that piece of paper was print reading that it was a hall pass from the Jordan High School, which was about 2 miles away from the scene. On the hall pass was a signature and the date, which was dated the day prior, Friday, March 27th. And blood wasn't the only thing that was found on the house, as there was some writing on the door on the house that read, King K the Savage. Now, the tag could have been on the house door long before this happened, since this home was abandoned, but police took a photo just in case. Police decided they'd use that hall pass and trace the evidence to identify who the young girl was. Now, by this time in the story, as the listener, you already know who the young girl was, but police didn't know, so they had to figure it out. And they ended up speaking to the principal of the school, Mr. Michael Irving, whose signature was on that hall pass. Mr. Irving said he was doing some work when the police reached out to him explaining what was going on, and they needed him to give them access to the school and their surveillance system. When police described what the victim was wearing when she was found, Mr. Irving immediately knew it was Tierra, based on the description of the outfit being a match to what she was wearing in the footage on the school surveillance. But just to be sure and confirm, Mr. Irving gave police access to the classroom that they saw Tierra walk into on the surveillance. In the classroom was Tierra's backpack and the classroom computer with Tierra's name at the bottom corner. And that's how police were able to confirm that their victim was Tierra Hall. This revelation left Mr. Irving stunned. He had known Tierra since she came into the school as a freshman, and now to know that she was deceased and taken out in such a brutal way was more than he could bear. At this point, police had the daunting job of letting Tierra's mother know everything. They went and knocked on Katia's door, and needless to say, Katia was devastated.
A 17-year-old murdered, her body found near her home and school. Tonight, police and her family are looking for answers. Hello, everyone. I'm Deborah Morgan.
And I'm David Crabtree. Whoever killed Tierra Hall is still on the loose, and police are releasing very few details in this case. However, have indicated Hall may have known her killer. WRAL's Ariel Clay is live from the police department. Ariel?
David and Deborah, police have not told us much. We're still waiting to hear a motive in this case. We don't even know how Hall was killed, but we are hearing from her mother, who says that she is angry that this happened to her child.
She was my heartbeat.
Less than 48 hours after her daughter was found murdered, Kotia Hall is struggling with the reality that the 17-year-old girl is gone.
I just do not understand. Her death means, what does it mean?
A question that is hard to answer. There are other questions the mother is asking. Who is responsible, and why would anyone want to kill the high school sophomore?
Why? She did nothing to no one.
Tierra Hall's body was found behind a vacant home on Trotter Ridge Road Saturday evening. A passerby taking a look at the home, which had just been sold, spotted the girl and called 911. Police Chief Jose Lopez says right now he can't reveal much, but says his detectives are hard at work.
Investigators have been pretty much almost nonstop going out chasing leads.
The spot where the teen was discovered Saturday is near her home and Jordan High School, where she attended. Her mother last saw her Friday, but did not call police to report her missing.
I thought maybe she was hanging out with a couple of her friends since it was going to be spring break. And that's what I chalked it up to.
By Saturday morning, when her daughter still had not responded to calls and texts, Hall became worried. Hours later, she would learn Tierra was dead.
I need to know why. I'm angry.
Well, Chief Lopez calls this a fast-moving investigation. He says that investigators will be back out in that neighborhood where Hall was found, canvassing, just hoping to find more information.
Katia turned to the public, begged and pleaded that if anyone knew anything to please come forward and provide any information that could lead to the discovery of who could have done this to her baby girl. Now, due to the nature of the crime, they knew that there was a motive behind this homicide and began to investigate immediately. The following day, after Tierra's body was discovered, Sunday, March 29th, police went back to the area and began asking questions to people in the neighborhood. Some witnesses say they did hear the voice of a female screaming, and they pointed out how one of the neighbors had surveillance outside of their home that may have picked up some footage. So investigators went to speak to that specific neighbor and asked if they'd give them access to their camera footage. And of course, the neighbor obliged, happily. Now, in this neighbor's footage from that Friday at around 12:40 p.m., you can see a male walking down the road in the direction of the home where Tierra was found. Literally a very short moment later, you see Tierra in the video following after him. And they knew it was Tierra from seeing her already in the footage on the school's surveillance. So now at this point, police need to go back to the school to see more footage of that day, and if the male in the video was also a student at Jordan High School. So they head back to the school and look over the footage. In the footage, you can see the male talking to Tierra in the hallways. The male appears to be taller than Tierra, wearing a red t-shirt and blue denim jeans with locks in his hair. Initially, the interaction between them seems pretty normal until the male snatches something from Tierra and then skedaddles off. Police believe this had to have been Tierra's phone that he took from her. And then naturally, Tierra is on his heels to retrieve her belongings from him. But he's in motion, moving faster than her, and she's steadily moving behind him, trying to catch up. Cameras capture the two leaving the school. And this is when we revert back to that footage on the neighbor's surveillance cameras. But here's where things become real clear to officers. Because Tierra followed the boy in the direction of the home, but as he's walking back from that direction, he's walking back alone without Tierra. The footage at the school shows him returning to the school without Tierra, but police spot something peculiar in the footage of the young man's return to school. The boy was covering his hands with his sleeves. He then goes into the restroom and moments later comes back out of the restroom, this time with his hands out of his sleeves in plain sight. The principal, Mr. Irving, was able to identify this boy as Kelton Brishon Fox. Shortly after Kelton came out of the bathroom, he went to the main office and told Mr. Irving he wasn't feeling well. So he called his mother and asked her to come pick him up from school. So she did. She came and got her son, and he left for the day. Police decided to go into the male's restroom of the school and swab it for evidence, and sure enough, there were traces of blood in the bathroom. You see, when Kelton came into the school with his hands covered up, it was because he had blood on his hands and he washed it off in the school bathroom. That's why he came back out of the bathroom with his hands in plain sight. He thought he was slick. He thought he did well with that, but if he was no fool, he'd know that droplets go flying everywhere. But clearly, he was no bearer of intelligence. And at this point, police had enough to move in on Kelton and place him under arrest. Tuesday, March 31st, 2015. Police arrested Kelton Fox, and while placing him in cuffs, they asked him if he knew why he was under arrest, to which Kelton replied, quote, unquote, because one of my friends is gone and they need to find out who did it. Of course, with Kelton being 17 years old, they had to notify his mother of what was going on, and his mother didn't take it well at all. She was understandably upset hearing that her child was going to jail for a homicide. When taken into the station, Kelton denied everything. He said he never left the school premises that Friday, and it was no way he was involved in the demise of Tierra, which obviously was a lie based on the surveillance. But police confiscated his sneakers while he was in custody and found traces of blood on them, to which they sent for testing. And sure enough, the blood came back that it was Tierra's blood on his sneakers. During this time, a warrant was issued for police to search Kelton's home. And when police went to Kelton's home, they made a beeline to his bedroom to see what they'd find. And what they found was very telling. In Kelton's room, investigators discovered multiple knives and even axes. And we know Tierra was found with multiple stab wounds. Police asked his mother questions about whether or not she knew he was in possession of these weapons. And she said she knew he walked around with a pocket knife as his own personal protection, but she had no idea about the several knives and axes, nor did she ever assume that he was ever capable of taking someone's life. And then they found some notebooks. And in these notebooks was the tag that read King K the Savage. But not only that, it was also his name on his Facebook page. Now remember, the tag King K the Savage was on a door of the house that police took a picture of. And that evidence in itself, in my opinion, was all they needed to successfully charge Kelton with Tierra's homicide. But if that wasn't enough, they also found in these notebooks pages written by Kelton detailing his obsession with Tierra and his thirst to kill, with words reading, "Killing is my hobby." Side note, the significance of the home that Tierra's life was taken at was actually once rented by Kelton's mother. Yes, they used to live at that home. So what was Kelton's obsession with Tierra? Well, you see, Kelton and Tierra were dating each other at one point. I'm not sure for how long, but they were in a relationship and things were okay for a little while until they weren't. You see, they had this on and again, off again dynamic going on, but according to what Tierra had told those close to her, Kelton had become far too obsessive over her, and it bothered her a lot. He was smothering, clingy, he was jealous, he would stalk her on social media, and it was too much stress for Tierra to deal with. So by the end of 2014, Tierra decided to call it quits and break up with Kelton. But this didn't sit well with Kelton at all, and in fact, he had made up his mind that Tierra must have been cheating on him, and it was too much for his fragile ego to bear. He began journaling his deepest, darkest thoughts and expressed his suspicions of Tierra cheating on him and him wanting to take her life for it. Police had officially charged Kelton for the butchery of Tierra with first-degree homicide on Wednesday, April 1st, 2015. Kelton appeared before a judge, and the judge ordered that Kelton be held without bond, and he was scheduled to return on April 23rd. Cortia didn't appear at the court that day, but she did speak to an ABC 11 News reporter and said that she prays she could find it in her heart at some point to forgive Kelton for taking her baby girl away from her. Cortia expressed how she was in complete shock when she found out that Kelton was the one who did this, because she knew Kelton very well. He had been to her home several times and never had a reason to feel like she couldn't trust him around Tierra. She said at times Tierra would describe Kelton as a little clingy, but it never came off as if it was something to be concerned about. I imagine it was probably something like how when, like you have a friend that could be clingy or a bit overwhelming and you just mention it to someone, like, oh my God, so-and-so is so clingy, they're annoying, Nothing that's to the degree of like an obsession, but it's something that's noticeable. So I guess Tierra probably conveyed it this way to her mother, and that's why Cortia didn't take it as something that was going to end up like this. Cortia said, quote, "I was in complete shock. I thought even if they weren't together, at least they were friends. She never complained, never said anything about him being abusive or violent or anything. So when I learned that, it was another hit in the gut. I didn't know. I did not know he was so mannerable. He shook my hand. He was, yes ma'am, no ma'am. Made sure she got in the house before he left, everything. So I had no reason to think he would do anything to her. I thought he loved her." End quote. Saturday, April 5th, a vigil was held for Tierra where people of the community gathered around to remember Tierra, to show support and offer love and prayers for Cortia, and released balloons in Tierra's memory, speaking to who she was while she was alive and wearing her favorite color, purple. Prosecutors were seeking a grand jury indictment against Kelton, but he wouldn't be facing the death penalty due to him being under the age of 18 at the time. And come Thursday, June 14th, 2018, Kelton was 20 years old at the time when he appeared at court for taking his ex-girlfriend Tierra Hall's life in such a gruesome way. The judge told him that he could be facing a life sentence, but investigators were unable to prove that what Kelton did was premeditated, which eliminated the first-degree charge. However, prosecutors argued that Kelton took Tierra's phone, knowing that she'd follow him, luring her away from the school with the intention of taking her life. That, in addition to those journal entries expressing his desire to take her life was enough for the second-degree charge. So after Kelton's defense team put on a pity party and highlighted that Kelton's father abandoned him as a child and that he had grew up in a violent home, to which I'm trying to understand, did he see his daddy abuse his mama, or was his daddy absent? Which one was it? But anyway, they also highlighted that Kelton suffered from PTSD, hallucinations, paranoia, and displayed some symptoms of borderline personality disorder. After the prosecution worked out a plea deal, Kelton decided to plead guilty to second-degree homicide. And while Tierra will never be able to experience life as a physical vessel in this world ever again, Kelton gets another chance at freedom as the judge handed down a mere sentence of 144 to 185 months in prison, equating to 12 to 15.5 years behind bars. By the time Kelton would be in his early to mid-30s, he'd still be young enough to experience life with a fresh start. Katia never gets a chance to see her daughter walk through her door again, while Kelton's mom not only gets to visit him if she wants, but she'd be able to embrace him walking through her doors again in just some years from now as I tell this story. It's really, really devastating when you think about it. As of today, Gaston Correctional Institution records show that Kelton is still in jail but is expected to be released in April of 2027. Literally just 3 years from now. Wow. You know, I don't understand the angle of not being able to prove this heinous crime was premeditated when he literally journaled his desires to take her life. How is that not premeditated? I don't know, maybe someone who understands the law better than me can leave a comment and explain a bit further, but this sentencing, in my opinion, is just another example of how the justice system has failed. And at this point, yes, I am going to bring race and color, whatever you want to dub it, into the conversation. Once again, another Black girl has been failed by the system. Feel how you want to feel about it. I really don't care. It's too many examples of Black girls and Black women being on the shittiest end of the stick when it comes to the justice system. All these claims of mental health challenges is what it is, but it doesn't take away from the fact that this man literally had a thirst for blood. He referred to himself as a savage, wrote it clear as day on the door of his old home, where he intentionally and, in my opinion, premeditatedly took his ex-girlfriend and viciously took her life, callously took a knife, one of many that he was in possession of, and stabbed her all over her face, her neck, her chest, 14 times with so much force that he broke the tip of the knife off in her face. He meant to do that, and now, in just 3 years from now, he gets to be out in the world again. He gets another chance at doing this to someone else again. You know how many stories I've done where the guilty had committed the same crime again after supposedly being rehabilitated for years and years in prison? Gregory Green is one of them. Bradley Stokes is another. I know some people can change, but the way Kelton was so passionate about his desire to claim a life that I don't think that demon is coming up off him no time soon. I'm disgusted with that judge. I truly am. And so I want to send my deepest condolences to Miss Tierra Hall. I'm so terribly sorry that you have to live with this grief. Tierra was as beautiful as you are, and her spirit will live on with you forever. May you continue to smile in life regardless, as I'm sure that's what Tierra would have wanted you to do. Rest in heavenly peace, Tierra Hall. Your name will live on forever.